just talk about Zwift. Basically, my thoughts on it, using it as an athlete for my own training, and also my thoughts on the use of it as a coach and a physiologist. So from an athlete's perspective, it's great. Obviously, the current climate, we can socialise with people on it, go out for the group rides, indoors. There's plenty of routes, there's plenty of different ways to keep busy on it. There's obviously the workouts, there's obviously your races. So the races have been great. They've been a really key part of trying to stay motivated over the past year and a half. But one thing I will say now, from a coaching perspective and a physiology perspective, the workouts have a lot of issues. It almost is like a child's got a crayon and they've just scribbled on the page as many colours as possible. And obviously each colour represents a different training zone. And the principles of adapting to endurance training is exposure and repetitive stress. The stress has to be repeated enough times on a consistent basis to improve. The body adapts to the stress, and naturally enough, if the stress is being changed too quick, that's an issue. Equally, if the stress isn't being changed too often, that is an issue in itself. But what I see with Zwift, they change the stress too often, and it's not giving the body a chance to adapt. But I'll go through that now in a minute.
They have improved over the past few years. Like originally, nearly every workout looked something like this here. So as you can see, there's loads of anaerobic stuff, some steady state anaerobic, steady state tempo. It just doesn't. There's no method to this madness. It's very stop start. I mean, why is the peaks so completely different between the hard efforts? There's no structure, and obviously, yes, this is titled a Zwift Racing block, but this is just a child getting on a bike and sprinting whenever they feel like it. It'd be as productive as that scenario. But looking at it, you would question, what is the goal of that session? Is it to just accumulate a lot of fatigue? Is it to just have a really hard hit out? There's no actual physiological adaptation I can see been keyly real targeted from that. Here's another one here. So it's like ramping up a large rest period, ramping up again, some almost like over-unders, and then rest period, and then repeats it again. It's just, there's no rationale behind them. And I mean, some of these are training plans, which is just worrying, because if you're doing that on a regular basis, it's not productive. Don't get me wrong, some of the sessions that they have, there is the odd ones that have a bit of a structure in them and like actually targeted towards your physiology. So for instance, there was some over-under sessions I seen where it was targeting just over-unders, and it was well structured. It was based off your FTP. Obviously, you go slightly above, slightly under, and you continue that the whole way through. And once they've set out to do that kind of session, and once they keep it within them constraints, then they're going to get the adaptation. But almost, I feel like they're trying too hard to keep it interesting, as opposed to designing a session plan to tailor towards adaptation. Because at the end of the day, we want to adapt to get better. We don't always necessarily want to get on the bike and just smash ourselves. So yeah, I mean, like this one here, the coach's challenge, it's basically just a mix of different steady state efforts with a mix of different kind of hard efforts. There doesn't seem to be any rationale behind it. Like, what's that? Some sprints or some efforts with some zone 2 in between. Then then back to zone 1 in between these ones, tempo in between these ones, and then some more zone 1 in between these sprints. It's just they're chopping and changing, trying to make it interesting, and in doing that they've lost the point of the session. It's not really ticking the boxes for me. I'll be honest. Like, there are some 2x20 sweet spots and things like that, and I know they're not the most fancy looking on a graph. Like, there's no array of colours like some of these ones, which are just plastered with every colour that Zwift has available for each zone, meaning that they're ticking off every zone. But if you're really training for adaptation, you're not going to be dipping into every zone throughout the ride, because if you're doing that, then you're missing the stimulus. You want to stress the stimulus of each zone independently at different times of the year. Yes, touching them in each session just to keep them fresh, but they feel like it just looks like they're trying to nail every zone in every session, and in doing that it's not specific enough. Your body's just not going to adapt to that. It's too generic, it's too one size fits all. Yeah, like, if you're going to be a climber, you need to do a climbing session. If you need to work on your sweet spot work to race like 70.3 for instance, well, you need to do sessions that replicate that. Whereas this, it's like they merge the two together, throw in some sprints, and it's just, it's not gonna get you too far, unfortunately. You'll feel like you've got a good workout, obviously, and of course there's people out there that just want to get on the bike, have a hard workout and leave it at that, and for them that's great. But if you're taking your training seriously, I'd look elsewhere, or get a coach. And even if you educate yourself on the topics of training and structured training, then you could build your own workouts, which is quite a good feature on Zwift. I use that for my own training. Keeps you honest. So yeah, they're a bit like the 2x20 sessions I was on about. As you can see, there's nothing fancy about them. They're plain and simple. Even that Olympic tri prep plan, that's just accumulating time in zone. It has to be specific to the demands of your race. That there is an over-under session. It's plain, simple, it works. This here it's like a bit of everything thrown into the one, like I was saying earlier. So what you've got some zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, and then some really high-end sprints at the end. All that's going to do is just like maintain fitness. You're not going to really improve with that kind of thing, because these sprints, there's not enough of them to improve your sprint capacity. This tempo stuff, they're not long enough to develop your threshold. That above threshold work is not potent enough. The zone 2 work, if you're looking to develop your zone 2, well then you need to be working a lot longer. The recoveries are quite short too, so therefore if these are truly all-out sprints, then the recovery time in between them is not long enough to guarantee that quality. I mean, there's quite a few flaws, but again, Zwift is great. I'm not knocking it down completely. I just think that the workouts side of things have to improve. They have a long way to improve. But yeah, Zwift is great. Obviously, in the current climate with COVID and that, it's been brilliant to have it. So yeah, it keeps people training indoors. If you're injured, you've obviously got this access to a global platform and communicate with other people. So it's great. It's ticking the boxes that way, and it's doing a really good job. So that's just my thoughts as a coach and physiologist. But from an athlete's point of view, it's great. It keeps you interested in your sessions. It's got a way of meeting people. It's obviously even the events. I mean, the events have kept me busy for the past few weeks. It's a weekly time trial. So yeah, it serves its purpose, and there is room for improvement, as with anything. So yeah, I can imagine them upping their game on this a bit further. So for instance, like the Zwift Academy, they've taken on a physiologist. He's probably the top age grouper in Kona, Dan Plews, and obviously he's structuring them and feeding into it. So they'll start to become a lot more specific to the demands of each event, and they'll tailor that towards their athletes' needs. So yeah, it's good to see that they're improving these things, and I'm just pointing out the fact that there's a long way to come, but they're working on it, and that's great.